Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Ponsky, your guide to college, and welcome to Being Jewish in College's video series, Kibbutz in 10 Minutes. Today, you're going to learn 10 minutes of valuable information from Zandy Frisch, coordinator of Jewish life at Ursinus College. Thank you so much, Zandy, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, like we do with everyone, starting the question off, which is, what is the name of the Jewish Life Center on campus?
We actually, we're housed within the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life on campus, for which there's a director of Religious and Spiritual Life, who's also our college chaplain. But the actual building is both a programmatic space and a residential hall that 4 students live in. It's called the Yost House, but that's just named after the benefactor. But people just call it the Hillel House.
Okay. Awesome. How many Jewish students are there on campus? And in particular, do you have a breakdown between Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionist, Humanist, whatever other cultural, but not religious, whatever the breakdown is?
Sure. I would estimate between about 100 to 200 Jewish students. Students do self-identify. They can self-identify on applications. So I have a rough number, but that doesn't obviously cover people that don't self-identify. But so I would say between 100 and 200. I would say the vast majority of our students are those that either identify as Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist. We are close by to the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia. So there are, I think, more than perhaps on other campuses, you might actually find students that, grew up in that context just because we're so close to where there are a lot of Reconstructionist rabbis and synagogues. There are a fair amount of students that are, I would say, tend to tell me, oh, I'm culturally Jewish, or I come from an interfaith house. We don't really have very many students in my time here, and I've been in this role for about 5 years, that identify sort of on the Orthodox end of the spectrum. So that really hasn't been the type of student that's come to Ursinus. So I would say definitely on the more liberal end of the denominations, and then just sort of culturally identifying secular Jews.
Okay, awesome. Are there kosher food options available to students on campus? And if so, what are they?
Sure. So in that Hillel House I mentioned, we do have a kosher kitchen, which is where we do most of our programming, and students when they cook. So those meals are kosher. They're vegetarian. And for major holidays like Rosh Hashanah and Passover, I'll order in kosher catering. However, on sort of a day-to-day basis, we don't have kosher options. I've told students, we've had a few students who've sort of wanted to try to keep kosher. And for that, I said they are welcome to use the Hillel kitchen, even if they don't live in the Hillel house. But mostly we have students that some will keep vegetarian. For Passover, for example, we can reimburse students if they want to buy kosher Passover food. The dining hall is pretty receptive to making kosher friendly options. Again, they're not being cooked in a Passover kosher kitchen, but I'll approve a menu so that there are Passover friendly food items, and they're marked and labeled. So I would say as a campus we're aware of kosher needs, but we just haven't had students that really have had them.
Okay, wonderful. So you kind of mentioned this already, but are there weekly Shabbat dinner or gathering opportunities for students?
Sure. So before COVID, so I guess everything needs an asterisk, so like what we used to do and hopefully get back to, we did have weekly Shabbat dinners, and that was sort of the mainstay of our programming. So every Friday night, there'd be a group of students who would sort of spearhead the cooking for that. I would say since COVID, last year we didn't have in-person eating really. And then this year we've sort of averaged basically 2 Shabbat dinners a month. And then I'll also, in addition to that programming, I'll usually do a weekly lunch and learn in the dining hall. So there is usually something happening, even if it's not a Shabbat dinner, every week for Hillel.
What would you say is your most, this could be before COVID, I always call it BC.
I know, right?
What is your most popular and well-attended program that you have on campus each year? And again, it could be before COVID, it could be now, it could be both.
So I would say Passover Seder, we usually have one of them. that's pretty well attended. So depending on if it's, during the week and students aren't able to go home, that one, they're allowed to go home just if it's difficult to travel. That's usually pretty well attended. But actually since COVID, I would say our Shabbat dinners have increased in numbers because we've been doing them twice a month. So I think that students are like, oh, Shabbat, and they really come out. So we've been averaging, I would say, like 25 students a dinner. We actually had not made enough food for one of them. So we've started taking RSVPs. Beyond that, I would say, again, we haven't done this in a few years, but we did, usually in the spring, we have a Holocaust survivor come, and people come out from all over campus, faculty, staff, students, really to attend that. So there is sort of interest in these larger lecture events, as well as sort of, the intimate, Jewish practice, cultural life.
Great. Great. Okay, so are there any Jewish studies majors, minors, or Hebrew language course options that are available to students? And I know you'll know this very well.
I know. So I am also in my other role, a professor in the Jewish studies. In Jewish studies, but in the religious studies department. So you can take courses with me. I teach about one Jewish studies course a semester. So nobody is particularly a major or minor, but you can be a religious studies major or minor. And by default, some students have just sort of like tracked their courses along with me, especially for the minor. You only have to take 5 courses. So some just managed to do all 5 in sort of a Jewish studies related way. So there's that. There is no, there's a Hebrew language, foreign language requirement, but not Hebrew language. That's not one of the ones that's offered. So we don't have any students doing that. But yes, there are Jewish studies. For example, I'm teaching, I just taught Judaism and Antiquity last semester, and I'm doing Bible and film next semester.
Oh. It's like a lot of Charlton Heston, I imagine.
Yes, I know. There's tons of Exodus, and I sort of, I just was working on the syllabus, and I thought I got to get away from Exodus. There's so many that it gets a little, yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about Ursinus and how their response is to any potential political or social justice issues around topics like BDS or anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism. Does that even play a factor at Ursinus? And if so, how does the administration and the college, handle that?
Sure. So I think our students, in general, the student body, not just the Jewish student body, while they're, I think, pretty politically aware, I would say, on the sort of national scene, they're not so politically aware when it comes to Israel and questions about anti-Zionism and things like that, BDS. Like when we've had speakers come onto campus, we do host a lecture series. For example, we've had we've had Jonathan Sarna come. We're having Deborah Lipstadt come, and hopefully, if everything goes well, in February. So when we have speakers like that come, we actually do make a point to say, define BDS, because not just the Jewish students, average students don't really realize what that is. So, I guess the good thing is then that sort of is a nice little bubble of where students don't really feel any kind of anti-Israel or anti-Zionist pressure. They're aware definitely of anti-Semitism on the national scale. And I would say the campus is very much supportive of Jewish students when it comes to that. For example, when we had the Pittsburgh murders a few years ago, we did a vigil, and the dean came. It just was tons of students came. So it's really nice to see that when Jewish students are feeling the need for support, that it's not just the Jewish community that's supporting it, the campus as a whole is. And likewise, like I mentioned earlier, with Deborah Lipstadt coming, I think as students will come and learn about anti-Semitism. I said the Holocaust survivors, always a very well-attended event too. So I would say in that regard, we're sort of making efforts to teach sort of students to be aware of these things, and that it's still a pressing issue, but it's not coming from their own personal experiences on campus. They're not really sort of needing that, I think, support because of anything that's happening on campus. So that is nice in that regard.
Wonderful. That's good to hear. So are there any challenges, if any, that a Jewish student might face on campus?
I think we've had a few students who sometimes will email me and say, oh, I have an exam scheduled on some holiday that I need to for. The faculty are made aware, I should say, about Jewish holidays, holidays in general for all faiths, but the Jewish holidays are particularly noted on the dean's calendar that comes out when faculty are writing syllabi. So they should be aware to not schedule something. That doesn't mean that doesn't accidentally get scheduled. And students will have to sort of alert their faculty member about that. And we do have a religious accommodations policy too, that if something, again, group work or a presentation is due on, something, Passover, what have you, they're, allowed to be, make other arrangements. But that's really my experience here. That's really been the extent of any students who are having to kind of say, hey, I'm Jewish. I mean, it's just sort of around the calendar, but not really. I think in the sort of realm of, diversity, they really haven't, I faced much, sort of uphill battles on our campus, which is nice.
Good. What is one interesting piece of information about Ursinus that you would want people to know?
So I think we're small. So if you're considering us as a school, it's probably because you want a small liberal arts college. And, we're in this nice little town of Collegeville. So even though we're close to Philly, students really are very much living on campus and spending their weekends on campus for the most part. What's really nice, I think, and distinguishes Ursinus, I think, from other colleges and my own, undergraduate experience, is that students really have a collegial, collaborative relationship with many faculty and staff. So there's research opportunities that you can do with faculty, and I've just been impressed by how comfortable students are seeking out those faculty and staff supports. So I think when it comes time for a student, for example, to ask for a recommendation, faculty really know students. So I think, again, to me, that's different than I was in graduate school at NYU. That was definitely different than I'm sure undergraduate experiences, when I was a TA there. So I think that's, again, really, I wish I had that, is my reflection on that.
Great. All right. And so my final question is always, what do you love most about leading the Jewish community at Ursinus College?
Sure. So it actually piggybacks on that last answer. So since I'm the only, Hillel staff person, and half my role is teaching and half my role is coordinating the Jewish life. I mean, students really are in charge of kind of the direction of what they want to see in Jewish life, and so I very much collaborate with them. I very much see them as colleagues, and so it's sort of funny because some of them are in my classes. They're calling me Dr. Frisch on one hand, but then I'm also going grocery shopping with them, and so they're calling me Zandy on the other hand. So I think that's really nice. I really feel it's I'm not programming for them, I'm programming with them, and I think that's a really nice experience, hopefully for them, but I definitely know it's a nice experience for me as well.
Awesome. Well, that's the end of my questions. Thank you so much for doing this, and for everybody listening. We're going to have all the information how you can reach out to learn about Jewish life at Ursinus College. And we're really excited to have you here today, Zandy. And thank you so much for everything. And
thank you so much.
Like I said, we will have this on YouTube, on our social media channels. And thank you again, everyone.
Yeah, definitely reach out. Thank you.